drafting to the WWE, draft used to be special. I don't know why I said hi, YouTube, nigga. I've been here before. Let's watch, nigga. Oh my gosh. Wait, press.
WrestleMania season is over, and in just a few days, the WWE is about to shake things up with the annual draft. The two-night event where wrestlers are sent from one show to another, new storylines and feuds are made possible, and I gotta say, as a kid who grew up in the 2000s watching wrestling, I used to love the draft. WWE Draft Night used to be a special night, and it all began all the way back in March of 2002 with the first ever draft. This was a night where the brand split that so many of us grew up with officially began. In 2002, for the first time
March 02, I was like -3 years old.
Ever, the WWE decided to split their rosters across two shows, Raw and SmackDown, with Ric Flair as the kayfabe owner of Raw and Vince as the owner of SmackDown.
Ric Flair owns SmackDown? That's crazy. Yo. I'm not the only one, at least I don't know about these earlier years, but like the more recent years, like Raw has always had a better roster than SmackDown. I don't know why, at least in my opinion. But these earlier years, I don't know. Maybe I don't see.
First draft took place 22 years ago, and it is a trip to look back at. First off, it is so clear watching this back and even doing a tiny bit of research that the company had absolutely zero idea on what the hell they were doing. For 2 hours on an episode of Raw, they had Flair and Vince take turns making selections for their show, drafting a roster from scratch. And this draft is hilarious because other than the top stars like Rock and Taker, who were the first two picks, 95% of the roster had no idea where the hell they were going. The talent was finding out their future the same time the fans were live on television. So on this episode of Raw, the entire roster is just sitting there being filmed, filled with anxiety, not knowing where the hell they're going to be wrestling next week, where their traveling buddies and friends are going to go, and in some cases where their significant others are going to be. So during the show, when the Dudleys get split up across...
Yo, is that Matt Hardy went before Lita cheated on him? Oh my gosh, I remember that shit.
Across the two shows, their reaction on TV was their genuine reaction on finding out that they're finally going their separate ways. But despite that, this draft was memorable for many reasons. The Rock going first overall to SmackDown, of course he had to go to SmackDown, and just roasting Vince. Undertaker being pissed off for being drafted by the guy who he just beat up at WrestleMania a week before this, and most importantly for them having Ric Flair draft the stupidest Raw roster you could have.
It's good, bro. Oh my gosh.
Possibly imagine.
I go lie.
SmackDown's roster cleared the Raw roster by so much it didn't make any sense. SmackDown was out here getting wrestlers like The Rock, Angle, Benoit, Hogan, and Edge. Meanwhile, Raw was getting heel Undertaker, washed up NWO going second overall without Hogan and Kane, which it's fine.
I'm good, man. Just chilling.
Thank God they got RVD.
What day is it today?
Imagine RVD on the
Wednesday. You know it's Wednesday.
Roster. But yeah, no, the draft was super unbalanced and just all over the place, and the company knew it because by the end of 02, the whole rosters got flipped upside down anyway. And just to make everything seem even more of a mess, Austin, who was so fed up with booking at this point, didn't even bother to show up to be drafted on Raw. So they had to make this whole storyline up of how he was somehow a free agent, but nobody else was. Meanwhile, poor Chris Jericho, who was the world champion 8 days prior to the draft, he didn't even get drafted on TV. He had to wait for his selection to be published on WWE.com after the show to find out where the hell he was going. And mind you, this was 2002. There was no internet at Starbucks. The 02 draft was a mess in every way and did not reflect what Raw and SmackDown ended up becoming in any way. But when I think of the 02 draft, I get nothing but warm and fuzzy feelings because personally, I think of SmackDown Shut Your Mouth on the PS2 because that game season mode actually starts at the draft.
Oh, look at the graphics of this shit, bro. What the heck? I mean, they couldn't have gotten the draft right. I mean, it was like, this is the first time they did it. And
you're able to replay and recreate the entire draft however you want it to be. And it is crazy to this day how well they replicated it. But yeah, despite this being a mess and despite them having absolutely zero planning, it is definitely, without a doubt, an iconic episode of Raw. I wish I was a little bit older so I could have watched this live because I can imagine how exciting this was at the time. But hey, this draft and brand split, this is what started it all.
Switch to Chrome to easily store your passwords so you can sign in with just a
play games. Well, I'm not really playing games like right now. We move on to the two because it's kind of late. But who's talking about this game? Who is? It's like I think this guy named Wrestling Gifs. Oh, okay. He kind of just talks about that shit. I don't know. I just chose to watch this video right now.
2004 draft, and this night was infamous. What was so special about this night was since 2002, for the most part, once the rosters got drafted, Raw and SmackDown rarely ever interacted. It was like the
Was that
Bloods and
Eric
Crips out here.
Bischoff
The
and
brands
Paul
were so
Heyman?
clearly divided with no interaction whatsoever. Just the idea of a SmackDown guy pulling
F5.
into Raw for like a huge deal.
F5.
So to have all the SmackDown guys.
Yo, am I the only one that thought the F5 used to look devious, bro? Like the nigga would have F5? Oh my gosh, that shit used to look devious, bro. The thing is that if you don't have the strength to do the move, the person's gonna land wrong, bro.
Guys pulled up to Raw for one night. It was like, whoa. And in terms of the actual drafts, none of the selections really changed the game. Instead, poor SmackDown just kind of got pillaged. Yeah, we're gonna take Shelton, Benjamin, and Edge, and here you can have Mark Jindrak. I
Who the heck is Mark Jindrak?
Jindrak's mom wanted him back in 2004. But this night is infamous for one pick. In the middle of the show, it was time for SmackDown to make a selection, and John Cena comes out and does a rap and basically calls both Bischoff and Heyman, who were the general managers, jackasses. Cena selects a draft pick for SmackDown.
This is when John Cena was in that Thugonomics era, bro, where he was like he was basically super hot fire of WWE. I broke up with my ex-girl. Here's a number. Psych, that's the wrong number. Or the time where he like rap battled Big Show and he's just like, "Did you eat from the toilet?" Oh yeah, that one's iconic. That one, oh yeah.
He gives it to Heyman, and Heyman starts complaining like, "Hey, this pick isn't legit. I'm not using this." And Bischoff demands he takes it. Heyman complains, but he slowly opens it up and reads it. He slowly stops speaking and says, "Are you sure you want me to take this draft pick?"
Hair back
Eric Bischoff says yes, and he announces to the world the pick is Triple H.
Damn.
Triple H gets drafted to SmackDown after 2 years of raining down terror. I mean, terrorist attacks on the Raw roster. The game was SmackDown bound, and it was like, what?
You see that Triple H spine buster? He has the best spine buster like of all time, bro. Like where he like, and then spins you in his spine. Yeah. Besides Batista's spine buster, like Triple H's spine buster move looks so smooth. Besides Batista's, because Batista's it's more of like a power bomb like than a spine buster, because he just lifts you up and then he doesn't go all the way down. So it's like I think he has the best spine buster.
The hell, because there was no one, especially back in 2004, there was no one who was more of a Raw wrestler in 2004 than Triple H. But nah, it didn't matter. Get ready to learn UPN, buddy. He's going to SmackDown, and this episode of Raw ends in one of the coolest main events I've ever seen live. Eddie Guerrero versus Triple H for the WWE title, and for some reason, this is a match that I think growing up, I probably watched over 100 times on YouTube in shitty 240p quality. Now, trust me, back in the day, this match definitely went platinum in the hood on YouTube, and it's just because of how much.
Didn't YouTube come out in 2005? This is from 04, or maybe this was posted later.
Trip this match was. Triple H in a SmackDown shirt taking on Eddie Guerrero for the first and last time a week after WrestleMania 20, and the match ends in a giant brawl, and everyone's just tweaking. Raw and SmackDown, blue shirts everywhere, red shirts everywhere. Austin pulling up in his AT.
Am I the only one that's like, you know, like the thing is with the finishers now, I think with like wrestling now, finishers, like a lot of finishers that like were actual finishers back then are like worse now. You know? Like Eddie Guerrero's finisher, the frog splash. Like some people just like a frog splash is like a basic move now, you know, like it's not like a finisher type of move no more. Even the pedigree, bro. Like now I'll admit Seth Rollins, as much as he's my guy, he kind of ruined it a little bit, like, cause it's like the pedigree used to be like a be all and end all move. Like Seth Rollins back in like 2016, it would take him like 3 pedigrees to end the match, and like it is worse because I saw Cody Rhodes do it once. I'm like, nigga, everybody does like finishers now, like where everyone's sharing finishers. It's crazy. Frog splash is now like a basic move. It's not even like a finisher no more. Same with like the older moves. Like I didn't even know for the longest time what's that guy's name, Jake the Snake, bro, or whatever that the guy who had is Jake the Snake Roberts, right? I didn't even know his finisher was the DDT. I thought that was just a regular move. That's how and don't even get me started on the sweet chin music. Everybody uses that. It's terrible, bro.
TV, a great
like,
match,
everyone
a
should
great
just have their
spectacle,
own
an
finisher.
awesome ending for an awesome show, and like, yeah, this had 7-year-old me on YouTube.
But I'm fine with like, let's say like if Stephanie McMahon was like to use the pedigree if she's fighting an opponent, because that's her husband. Seth, it makes sense because that's like his like Triple H was like his mentor, so it made sense. And plus he couldn't use the curb stomp, stuff like that. The spear is used by like a lot of people. Even Jey Uso is using that. It's crazy.
Chokehold. Sadly, Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays, so he never went to SmackDown and got traded back. But nonetheless, a classic draft episode.
June 05.
Moving on to the 2005 draft, this is probably
I was not born yet. I was probably still in the womb.
my favorite and the one that is most ingrained in my brain because I vividly remember.
I am born in 05 though. I'm not 06. It's just October 05.
As a kid watching every single episode and seeing every single selection live over a month. Yeah, this was a draft that didn't take place on one night and actually took place over the course of a month, and as a result, it just made everything so fire. I will never forget watching Raw. I'm like 7 years old, and SmackDown was definitely my favorite show at the time because my boy Cena was on it, and the first draft selection ends up being...
You were 7 in 05. So you're born in 1998? 1998? Damn.
John Cena, who comes out to open up Monday Night Raw, and when I tell you I was jumping for joy and screaming and going crazy just because Cena was on my TV on a Monday, I'm not joking. Probably the most fond wrestling memory I have because of how young I was and how much the surprise caught me off guard. And every episode after that, Raw, SmackDown, didn't matter. It was like, whoa, who's gonna get drafted? And what made it so crazy was it wasn't idiots like Spike Dudley getting drafted or something. Nah, you tune into Raw, Cena comes out and he's beefing Jericho. Next week on Raw, Kurt Angle is in the cut. Meanwhile, on SmackDown, Randy Orton is interfering in the main event. It was top-tier talent making the switch. But the coolest moment for sure, other than Cena being drafted to Raw, was definitely when the World Heavyweight Champion went over to SmackDown. See, since Cena left to Raw, so did the championship with him, and as a result, SmackDown was left without a world title. So as the draft was going on, they actually had the storyline where a new SmackDown championship was going to be created, and they had a 5-man match that went 44 minutes, and at the end, JBL won the match and was going to be crowned. Until we found out that the last pick of the draft was Batista, who comes out with the world title, officially joins SmackDown, and as much as I love one-night draft nights, especially the ones that came after this month-long draft was just so special. It was big stars jumping shows, every week felt massive, and yeah, it set up the next 2 years perfectly. Truly
Raw,
a special time. 06 didn't really have a draft, instead because ECW was becoming the third brand, they had Paul Heyman stand in the ring and just gave him 2 selections, and he was able to select any 2 wrestlers he wanted, and he chose Kurt Angle, which was a great pick, and then he chose the Big Show. Yeah, because if I could choose any wrestler on the roster, I'm choosing this.
Nigga put Peter Griffin.
And we are the reason.
I'll walk for miles inside this pit of danger. A place where no one follows me. I'll walk alone.
I hate the Big Show. Anyway, 07 was a return to form, and it was back to being a special one-night event. And this was an episode that I remember being really hyped for back in the day. It was a special 3-hour episode of Raw, and wrestlers from all 3 brands were going to appear. And this time, draft picks were actually up for grabs through matches. So when Edge defeated Cena, that meant SmackDown got 1 draft pick. First of all, I almost threw up in my mouth saying that. Second, how could you not be hyped as a 9-year-old tuning into Raw? And not only are there draft picks and wrestlers changing brands, we're out here getting Cena versus Edge on free television. We also got probably the most random triple threat you could imagine. Batista versus Jeff Hardy versus Elijah Burke. My mind can't compute that. It doesn't make sense. The whole idea of the night was perfect. It was really hyped up and really well done. The whole format change and everything was perfect. The only issue was nobody of note got drafted. Yo, do you know how deflating it was as someone who always prefers SmackDown over Raw, sitting through matches like The Miz versus Snitsky just as he's...
I mean, I'm more of a Raw guy, but it makes sense. Especially, like, I liked when, like, in 2016, when I was, like, mainly on this stuff, like wrestling. SmackDown in 2016 was, like, on Tuesdays. Just like Raw was on Mondays, so I would watch both back to back. But, like, when they moved that shit to Friday and shit, I would just watch Raw.
SmackDown get a pick and being all excited, and the pick ends up being Chris Masters in 2007.
Who the heck is Chris Masters?
Here? I mean, Chris Benoit got drafted to ECW. And nothing was ever
wasn't
the
he
same
dead
again. Good planning, good ideas, just not good draft picks. If anything, the most memorable moment of the night was Vince McMahon getting drafted to hell. But it's all good because the company took the 07 approach and came back with it again in 2008.
He was not in that car.
Let's just say they heard all the chatter about nothing important happening.
June 08.
Went nuts.
I was like,
the 2008 draft is one of the most memorable nights of television I've ever seen live. This was an awesome night. This was also such a fun watch for me back in the day because it also happened to be the first day of summer vacation, so all my friends came over and we all watched it together. together, and it seemed like every single pick had us going insane, for better or for worse. See, by 2008, we had like 6 years of the brand split, and there were so many wrestlers who in our brains were ingrained as SmackDown guys or as Raw guys. Just the thought of them switching shows made us feel uncomfortable. So when the 08 draft happened and it started and Rey Mysterio got drafted from Raw to SmackDown, to say my skin was crawling would be an understatement. Once the graphic showed up on the screen, a part of me died that night. Rey Mysterio on Raw just felt wrong. It felt disgusting. It felt illegal. It was like seeing Dwayne Wade on the Cavaliers in 2017. And the worst part was, this was just the beginning. The night was just filled with surprises and surprises, because right after this, Finlay won a match and got Jeff Hardy drafted to SmackDown, which, as you know, the rest was history. But even in that moment, Jeff on SmackDown, it just felt like a match made in heaven. CM Punk finally glowed up from ECW, Batista got sent back to Raw, and on any other night, this would have had us tripping. But yeah, once Rey was gone, at this point we were numb, or so we thought. Nothing could have prepared us for when Michael Cole and Jim Ross had to switch places. That moment is so insane because JR and Cole didn't know they were moving shows, so when you're watching this, you see them get drafted for one another. Poor JR, it looked like he wanted to end it all on live TV, because when this happened, he basically got demoted on live TV. Jim Ross not being the Raw commentator, and at that time, Michael Cole not being the SmackDown commentator, it felt disgusting. From the first time I ever watched wrestling back in 02-03, all I knew was Jim Ross called Raw, Cole called SmackDown, and now it was mumbo jumbo. It's like, well, what are we gonna do? Poor King, he doesn't have JR anymore. How's he gonna be? Everything I knew was gone, and just everything I knew, everything that made me feel warm and cozy as a wrestling fan at that point for my whole childhood, everything got messed up on this night. Rey Mysterio's now on Raw, Batista's going back to Raw, Jim Ross is on SmackDown. What is this? And to cap it all off, Edge eliminated Cena to win a battle royal in the main event for a draft pick, and he ended up getting Triple H drafted to SmackDown. Talk about wrong, talk about feeling uncomfortable. The same man who just a few minutes ago in the same video I talked about how he embodied Raw like no one else back in 04, now in 08 he was actually going to SmackDown for real this time. This draft changed everything. The Raws and SmackDowns we knew for so many years that we grew up on, that I grew up on, it was done. This was a new era, and it's so funny how these brands and wrestlers being on a certain show just meant so much to us back in the day as kids. It's like there's no way in hell that kids these days care that much if Cody Rhodes is on Raw or if he's on SmackDown. But it was still real to us, damn it. A super memorable night.
You wouldn't give a fuck about it now. Like now, doesn't really matter. Like, but back then, I could definitely see it. You know,
a night that I'll never forget, a really fun night, the night that really changed everything. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Vince McMahon died again. Yo, what is wrong with this guy trying to die or fake his death every draft night? The next year in 2009, they ran the draft back the same way, and what's funny is they low-key kind of reversed everything they did the year prior. Yeah, Triple H on SmackDown is not it anymore. Let's get him back to Raw. Rey Mysterio, please go back to SmackDown. Fans are throwing up every time you come out. Please go back to SmackDown. And like, it's pretty funny when you think about it, because like, yeah, Triple H got drafted to Raw in April of 09. Bro, this guy's been on Raw since January. He got beat up on Raw. He's been beating up people on Raw. He saw his wife got clapped.
This is like 09 is the era of Menace Orton. I know that for sure.
On Raw, he was out here doing home invasions on Raw. He's been a part of the Raw roster, guys. But other than Triple H, this one definitely had some pretty important transfers. CM Punk went to SmackDown, and so did Jericho. And I remember during this show, though, that this was the year where it really hit me, and I really began to pray and hope that somehow, some way, John Cena would end up going to SmackDown. So this was during the time where Cena's character was really changing, and he was really entering his super cringe era. And as someone who grew up with him as a rapper, as a cool tough guy, like hustle low to respect chain gang era, in my 11-year-old head, I was like, hey, maybe if he gets drafted to SmackDown, he might become cool again. He might become a rapper again. So this was the year where I watched the entire draft, and every time a pick was selected, I was hoping, I was praying, I'm like, please, it might be Cena to SmackDown. It might be Cena to SmackDown. Sadly, it ended up being the Big Show. It's always the Big Show. It ruins everything. It ruins everything. Every single time. Well, it's fine. Cena to SmackDown didn't happen, but man, I used to pray for it. The 2010 draft was a draft that for some reason I genuinely had zero memories of, and once I went back and watched it makes sense why, because nothing of value really happened here.
I was 5.
Edge got drafted from SmackDown to Raw, which I had zero recollection of, and I think it's fair because like 5 months later, he's world champion on SmackDown. It was alright, just nothing to really write home about. Even the matches were kind of like, what are we doing here? The last match for the draft pick on this night was Hornswoggle beating Dolph Ziggler. How do you even think
is that a
of booking
young
that?
Dolph
But the
Ziggler?
next year, the
Oh
2011
my
draft, the
gosh.
last draft for 5 years. Now, this is
April
one I remember.
11. Oh, I was in
Sadly, the
kindergarten at
2011
this
draft was a
time.
night
What
where
the
when I
heck?
was watching this and I was witnessing it, I really thought my life was going to change forever. After years of begging and begging and hoping that maybe one day John Cena would return
Is
home to
that
SmackDown and be cool
Kofi?
again, it
Boom.
actually happened.
Boom.
The 2011 draft opened with The Big Show. Yes, The Big Show, the most useless wrestler of all time, winning
Nigga
a
said the
20-man
most
battle royal
useless.
with Kofi Kingston and earning SmackDown a draft pick. And just like every other year when the wrestlers were being shown on the screen and randomized, a tiny part of me was like, please be Cena. And it actually happened. It ended up being John Cena, drafted to SmackDown.
Oh
I had
shit.
never in my life been more thankful for The Big Show. If I could have, I would have bought him 30 Big Macs, no problem. It was
30?
exactly
Oh
what I was
nah.
hoping for years at this point, and it was so shocking. It was so hyped.
Isn't
It
this
was
the
so
one where he
exciting.
went back
Cena
to
got
Raw?
drafted to SmackDown in a huge surprise. The
this like
crowd
the
was
one
going
where he went
crazy,
back to
and this
Raw?
was something that really felt like could change the company. In my mind, all these thoughts were racing like, wow, there's so many feuds for Cena now. How will he be on SmackDown? Who are they going to push on Raw as a result of this? And it was legit game changing in every way. And most importantly, as someone who was in my peak preteen I hate Cena now because the internet told me to phase, I thought this was going to make Cena cool again and not be Barney. But yeah, this draft was awesome at
Oh
the time.
shit.
Even though Rey Mysterio got sent back to Raw, by this point, the damage had already been done. It didn't matter. Even Randy got drafted to SmackDown, and the main event was a 6-man tag match between The Miz, Punk, and Del Rio versus Cena, Christian, and Mark Henry. And I knew Raw was going to win this because SmackDown had just been clearing the draft picks, and they had to end off the night by having a star from SmackDown go to Raw. And I was just hoping and praying, like, you know, please be Kane or something. They have the match and Raw wins as predicted, and as the randomizer goes off, the most annoying thing that could have possibly happened happens. Cena gets drafted back to Raw. Nah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This was so stupid. I was so mad. I was legit mad at this point. After years of me secretly hoping for this switch, they had the audacity to do it and then troll us. You know what? Not even troll us, troll me. They had the audacity for me to get flashbacks of Cena on SmackDown, get all excited, get all nostalgic. Wrestling was going to feel right once again. Cena was going to be cool again. They even had Cena put on the damn SmackDown shirt just to take it all away. And what really pissed me off with the icing on the cake was when he did get drafted back to Raw, he was all smiling and happy. Oh, look what we have here. I guess I'm staying on Raw. No, bro, we wanted you on SmackDown. Stop smiling. I don't know if it was like this for anyone else. I doubt anyone else really cared if Cena was on SmackDown or Raw, especially in 2010 or 2011. But for some reason, I did. And this is what they did to me. But jokes aside, it's a pretty funny moment. It is kind of stupid, but hey, I'll allow it. It was actually Vince playing a prank on the USA Network by wanting to troll them and make it seem like he had drafted their biggest draw to another channel for a few hours. So in that case, it's pretty funny. But yo, it definitely broke my heart. I just wanted it to be 2004 again. My bad. But that ended up being the last draft for a while, because after this in mid-2011, the brand split was basically over. After almost 10 years, the brand split was done, and every week it was a free-for-all. Raw became a super show, and SmackDown became even more of a B show that less and less people started watching, and the weekly product, especially SmackDown, just became less and less watchable as time went on. But then, it was 2016, and it was time to run it back. Apparently, it was 2002 all over again, and it was time to split the brands one more time from scratch. It was time for a new generation of fans who experienced the brand split and forged bonds with certain wrestlers being on certain brands. It was time for a new era. Kind of.
But sadly, I didn't really care as much because like, I just kind of got
the first one, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the 2016 draft was a very special night, just like the ones I just talked about. Back in 2016,
and then you know, Stephanie McMahon started glazing. They're like, Raw's first pick, Seth. Oh my, Rollins. Like I love Seth Rollins, but the glazing was crazy. Like, oh my gosh.
High school, and I was a really legit wrestling fan at this point. But
and
they
SmackDown.
got me. They got
when
me
Daniel Bryan retired for like a year, he retired for like 2 years. Like this is the thing about wrestlers, bro. Like when you retire, stay retired or like don't retire, bro. Because it's just fake to me. Because when he retired, bro, I thought he was gone for good. But then he came back like 3 years later.
He got me amped once they announced the draft and they announced the brand split again. I was back into it. And with Shane and Bryan heading up Tuesdays, Foley and Steph on Mondays, the rosters were drafted. And on this night, both rosters were absolutely stacked. Just by splitting the rosters again, I was back. I'm like, hey, I'm actually going to watch this next week. And 2016 was probably the last time where a draft really moved me, where I was genuinely
Ambrose
excited.
was champion
After this, you know, we had some shakeups, we had some redrafts.
Oh, yeah. Some NXT people also came. I think I remember that.
a bunch of restarts, but nothing captured the magic like this one did.
Ambrose.
Either way, the point is, when we were
Rollins,
young, when we
bro.
were naive little kids watching wrestling, when SmackDown and Raw truly felt different, there were very few nights in the year as fun and as exciting as this night. It was such a blast to be a kid and watch draft night. You've seen all the moments, you've seen all the picks. It just felt so special back then.
I can only say that, like, I can only say I envy, like, not envy, but like, imagine being a kid during like the early, like, cause I was born in 05. So like, the only years of the 2000s I really experienced was like a part of 08 and 09. Other than that, I grew up in like the 2010s. But like, to be born, to be like 10, 11 years old in like 2003, 4, 5 would have been like crazy. I think it would have been good. Or like even being a teenager at that time. That, oh bro, like seeing technology progress, it must have been crazy. Cause by the time I was able to like know shit, like the iPhone was like just coming out. So it was like, like I didn't really see that progress. But anyways, if I was that age, I would be an old ass nigga by now.